When we first started the journey as concerned lay Catholics, one of our members heard survivors say, "What about the laity? Do they remember us as their brothers and sisters? Do they even pray for us?" On behalf of all of us at CLC, we are so deeply sorry for the trauma inflicted on abuse victim survivors. The church, which should have been a place of safety, became a place of trauma. We understand that in addition to the abuse itself, survivors are also sometimes shunned and ostracized by fellow Catholics who do not want to believe victims. We are especially sorry for this lack of compassion and solidarity. While changing the attitudes of our leaders is difficult, we believe that as concerned lay Catholics, we can play a role in bridging the gulf that has developed between many survivors and the rest of the Catholic faithful. Hearing the stories of survivors in their own words is one of the ways we try to do that. And so today we are grateful to bring to you Irene Deschênes, who will be sharing her story with us. Welcome, Irene.
Thanks, Mark.
I'd like to begin by saying thank you for your courage and vulnerability in sharing your story. I know not every victim feels safe to share their story for a variety of reasons, and so we are grateful that you've agreed to do so. Also, if you don't feel comfortable sharing your responses to any of the questions, please feel free not to. To begin, I invite you to share your experience of abuse in the church. What happened?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I'm 62 now. So, I often wonder, do people want to hear 62 years of my life, or do they want to hear specifically about my experience with the church? And I suppose they're intertwined in the sense that I grew up Catholic. So my family of origin was very, very religious. And so that just meant, prayers at meals, sometimes church every day, for sure, church on Sunday, prayers at bedtime, going to a Catholic school. So that's part of who I am. And so I found that the church was a loving place. It was right beside the school, and I had felt I had good relations with the teachers and other staff. And I was just a kid, 10 years old. So probably the biggest concern at the time was, why does my mom make me eat broccoli for dinner? So, and I think everything was fine. And then Father Sylvester came into my life, and he groomed me from the ages of 10 to 12. And so that's when he sexually assaulted me during that time period. And um, then I went on to grade 7 and 8, went on to Catholic high school. I think at the time we had to pay tuition as well. And I have four siblings. So, that wasn't very easy for my parents to have to pay to send us to a Catholic institution. Had lots of Catholic teachers, Catholic nuns, priests would come in and speak to us. So it was just part of my whole being a Catholic. And uh, so got married and had my children. When my daughter turned about the same age I was, that's when my memories of childhood sexual abuse by a Roman Catholic priest were recovered. And so it was 1992, and there was no internet at the time. It was really an isolating experience. I really thought that there was no way that could happen to me, because a Catholic priest would never do that to a little girl. So, I really thought I was going crazy. And then I was watching an episode of Phil Donahue. It's an old talk show from the 1990s, and Barbara Blaine was on there, and she's the founder of SNAP, the Survivors Network of those abused by priests. And she was in Chicago, so there was a contact phone number for her at the end of the program, and I called her, and she was the first other survivor that I had ever spoken with. And so little by little, we grew our network, and I started meeting more and more survivors. Most of them were from the United States. And it was at that time that I called the church, and I was just calling all these different parishes because I wanted to speak to a priest to let him know about my memory recovery. But I didn't know priests took Monday off of work because they work Sunday. So it took a long time before I found a priest, an actual priest that I could speak with. And this priest to me said, "Well, you should call the chair of the sexual abuse committee." And at the time, I remember thinking, how can there be a sexual abuse committee if I'm the only one that was ever sexually assaulted by a priest? So clearly there were others. So that first meeting was not successful in that I didn't feel heard. Um, there was no apology given. There was no acknowledgement of the pain that I was going through. He said that they would pay for counseling for me, and that's where I started. So, and finding a counselor at that time, especially to find someone specific to abuse by a religious authority, was very difficult because, they weren't talking about that necessarily in schools. And so to find a therapist who understood the deep impact that that would have on my soul was really difficult to find. So I found that I wouldn't stay with a therapist for very long because I really didn't feel understood, and tried to, untangle my experience as a Catholic with, this huge gap between what the church is teaching and the way that I was feeling and what happened to me. I couldn't wrap my head around that. So that was part of the difficulty in the journey. And then I spoke when I was speaking to other survivors, they were mentioning that they were filing lawsuits. And I thought, well, maybe that's how the church will listen to me. Maybe if I file a lawsuit, we can have a conversation. But of course, it did the exact opposite, because once you file a lawsuit against Catholic Church, they don't want to talk to you anymore. It's us versus them right away. And it's not the church speaking to me or a representative of the church. It's indirectly the lawyers speaking to me through the priest or the bishop or the chair of the sexual abuse committee. So all conversation shuts down from there, and I didn't know that. So it was pretty arduous journey. Went into a deep depression. There were lots of years I was unable to work. If I did find work, usually I couldn't stay. I had a real problem with people in authority. So just had a real difficult time. And then when I did go public and I spoke to the media and my name was out there, then people wouldn't hire a whistleblower. So I just found continuous employment to be very difficult. And so, as a result of that, didn't have a job where I had a pension, or I had a lot of contract positions. So I didn't have any benefits for a lot of years. The diocese cut off counseling after a few years. So I had to access counseling at the sexual assault center, which was amazing. The counselors I spoke to there were wonderful, but they had long wait lists, and they were like maybe 6 sessions. And then I had to wait another year and I could have 6 more sessions. So, um, so that's not very helpful to one's healing. So I didn't feel supported, and I had lack of access to resources, and I didn't have stability in my career. So then I had filed a civil suit, and when when we were in mediation, the mediator said that the church said that that was their final offer, and my lawyer said you need to accept that offer. It had gone on for quite some time, and so uh, me and another survivor, we accepted that offer. So shortly after that, I went to the police in Chatham. It was in Chatham, Ontario, where the abuse had occurred. So I had to go to the Chatham police. And so they started an investigation, and that seemed to drag on. And I would call, say, any updates? And, it just seemed that there was a lack of communication. So, they were doing their investigating, but I wanted the investigation done yesterday because I knew it was true. And so what are you investigating? Like, it's true, it happened. So finally, Father Sylvester was arrested, and it did get press, and so more and more victims came forward, and so there were almost 50 of us in the courtroom in Chatham, Ontario. 50 once girls that were now women that were victims of his, and subsequently after the criminal trial, there were another 50 women that came forward, and there may have been more since then, since 2008. So during the trial, there was a police report that was found from 1962. And so some little girls had gone to the police in Sarnia in 1962. And so at the end of the criminal trial, I asked my lawyer, during the civil suit, they said we were the only ones. They didn't know anything about Sylvester. Can I reopen my civil suit based on that? And she said, well, you should find a contract lawyer for that. So I did. I found a contract lawyer in Toronto, and she took my case. And so finally, after about 10 or 11 years, it was determined that I could reopen my civil suit. So Justice Aston said I could reopen my civil suit, and then the Diocese of London, of course, they appealed that decision. So then I went to to Ontario Court of Appeal, and I was successful there. And the church again appealed. So then I went to the Supreme Court of Canada, and I was successful there. So then we went to mediation, and by the time we got the mediation date, we were in mediation for about 12 hours. And so that decision was made. We came to a settlement, and then it took quite a while before I got my money. But it was at that point I was 60 years old, and my memories were recovered in 1992. So that was an almost 30-year court battle. And during that time, um, Bishop Fabro went to St. Ursula's Church, which is beside the school where I went to, and he made an apology across the board to all the victims. But I guess some of the victims wanted an apology, and he felt like he was doing the right thing doing that. But I don't think it would have been too onerous for him to sit down individually with each victim and have a chance to let them be heard and to offer a deep apology at that point. So that was quite disappointing, to be honest. So, after I got my money and I was able to retire, a group of us got together and we decided that we wanted to do something to protect children and to, raise awareness about the problem of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. And so that's when we founded Outrage Canada. And we chose the name Outrage Canada because I was saying to the group, every time there's another article in the newspaper or in the media and they say another Catholic priest has been charged with sexually assaulting a minor, people would say, "Oh, there's the Catholic Church for you," and that was their reputation. But from my perspective, I was saying, I don't care what they think their reputation is. From my perspective, like, where is the outrage? People are not outraged because it's so commonplace anymore. And so that was so disconcerting for me. And so as a group, we decided to name ourselves Outrage Canada. And a year ago, April 7th, a year ago, we were incorporated. And so since then, we've developed our website. We've done our value and mission statement. We hired Murray Foster from Great Big Sea to create an anthem for us. We designed our logo. Yeah, our website is up and running. We got t-shirts made. And so we've only been in existence for a year. And so here we are. So I hope people will go visit our website, outragecanada.ca, and help support us in any way they can by sending kind words, buying a t-shirt, or making a donation. That would be really appreciated, because as a fledgling organization, just to get started, it does cost a lot of money. So yeah, that's where I am today.
Wow, it's been a long journey for you, and there's been a lot of downs with a few ups. Certainly, finding other victim survivors who were in similar situation as yourself must have. I don't know what that feeling must have been like exactly, but to know that you're not alone. How have you managed to survive through all of this? I think I would be devastated if um, if such trauma happened to me.
Well, like I said, there were a lot of years where I wasn't a very productive person in society, right? So that was really hard. And I think, I wish I could just say to you, this is what every survivor should do. This will work for you 100%. But of course, it's a journey. And so I took a little bit from here and a little bit from there and a little bit. And I think probably the biggest part for me is to find a really good therapist. And if it's not a good fit, don't stay. Don't stay if it's not a good fit. I thought all therapists were the same. I thought it was me. So I stayed with a therapist for too long. So I learned that different therapists do different things differently. And so find a good therapist, that one that you connect with, one who gets you and can help move you through whatever part of the healing journey you're going through at the time. So I tell people, surround yourself with professional help. And the most important piece too, along with that, is to surround yourself with personal support. Don't hide from your friends. Don't if you're having a bad day and you need support, call them up and cry with them. Like, right? You'll do the same for your friends. They're going to have days when they need you there for them. So, and people, I feel like people are honored when I contact them and say, I'm having a really rough time. And they say, "Oh, you're coming to talk to me." And they really appreciate that. I can't do it every day for sure. I don't want to wear them down, but yeah, it's really important to have good friends that you can speak to and, cry with and laugh with, for sure.
That's great to hear, and we hope you find support in us, Concerned Lay Catholics, who stand with and for you. I know CLC has some programs that help support victim survivors, but I want to know, what do you think, Catholics in the pews need to know about what's going on, what happened to you, about the church that you love, that you grew up with, but also the dark side of some of its members and clergy. What do you want people to know?
Mark, I can't tell you the number of people that have told me, I had a feeling about so and so. I saw Father so and so take this little boy into a secret part of the rectory or into his bedroom. I saw Father so and so with a 10-year-old in his car. I think people are aware and they just don't want to speak out. And, there's got to be somebody in the church, maybe not going to the bishop, because I don't know that the bishop will do the right thing immediately. But I think concerned Catholics have to get together and have conversations. And I had a woman call me and she said, Irene, there's this youth pastor at our church and he's doing this and he's doing that. And I said, you need to call the police. And she said, I can't. And I called the police, Mark, and they said, she needs to call me. You can't call me to say what somebody else witnessed. She did not call the police. That breaks my heart. And no matter what faction of society we're in, we're all mandated reporters, right? We're all mandated reporters. We can call the police, we can call CAS, we can talk to our friends. Did you see this? To make sure, like, sometimes people want to be reassured that what they're seeing is what they're seeing and have conversations, be open and honest about it. It can happen in your church. It is happening in your church.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying all of this. I know, having worked in parishes, that at least here in the Archdiocese of Edmonton, there are programs to form volunteers to be able to look out for whenever this happens. I know there are dioceses that have a helpline or a report abuse line right on the front page of their websites. But even with all of this, I know there's still a culture out there that chooses to want to protect the priest, protect the institutional church. Um, and I feel like you've had similar experience like that. What would you want to say to the institutional church, and to Catholics who choose to turn their eyes, their gaze from the reality that is right before them?
So, first of all, I want to say that for some dioceses on their front page, they have a button that you can click to report abuse, but that's an internal mechanism. And so then it still remains secret. They'll deal with it internally. And on a lot of other diocesan websites, yeah, you really have to search to find that button. But it's all, again, internal reporting. For me and for a lot of abused Catholics, our knee jerk reaction is to go to the very institution that harmed us, and we will be re victimized as I was. Absolutely, 100%. Excuse me. So that's why I say, like, people need to report elsewhere. Report to the CAS, report to the police. I don't think internal reporting works because that way they can keep it as their little secret and, continue to brush it under the rug. And I don't think that's helpful for anyone.
That's a really good point. I never knew that would be the case, the internalized kind of dealing with things. So I
Yeah,
think that's
even if they say that they're independent from the church, the people on this committee, they're all Catholics. So they might not be employed by the church, but they're all Catholics. And so, like you were saying, that there's this culture of parishioners who don't want to say anything, or they don't want to rock the boat or whatever. So that's one of the things that Outrage Canada is working on right now. We want to establish a national independent reporting agency so that all complaints go to this one agency. So they say, oh, this person has complained about Father Sylvester. Look at this, 47 other little girls have complained about him. Whereas when the church was holding all this information, they're like, oh, we need to keep this covered up. We need to keep this hush hush. So we need this national independent reporting agency. So you walk into a school and a lot of the students know about that one teacher or those two teachers that they don't want to be alone with, and other people are reporting these teachers, and it goes to the principal at the school. So the principal at the school and the chair of the sexual abuse committee, they're not trained investigators. So what do they do with these allegations? How can we keep this hush hush and just continue with the business of the day? So that's not helpful for the victims or any possible future victims. It's not helpful for anyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for telling me about that. And of the work that Outrage is doing, so that's one of the calls to action, I imagine. Are there other things that Outrage would want to see, and in how things are structured in church and how people address situations like this?
Yeah, so we do have a subcommittee that's working on that. We're working on our position paper now. And we're getting a lot of good feedback from lots of different groups to tell us how, because not one person, especially not me, but not one person or one small organization such as ours has all the answers. So we're just having conversations with lots of different stakeholders about what that would look like. And then hopefully we're going to present that to the MPs and MPPs and um, MLAs. That's not a term we use often, but I'm learning to see how they can help us, right? To get this enacted somehow, and hopefully I'll see that in my lifetime. That's really one of my goals. So there's a lot of different little pieces of work that are going on in our organization, and we think at the end of the day everything will come together. But that's why we're having conversations with concerned lay Catholics, Bishop Accountability, teachers organizations, sports, gymnasts, divers. We're having conversations with all different groups of folks that work with child serving agencies.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that you mentioned what you dream for. Right now in the church, we're going through what's called the Synod on Synodality, and Pope Francis has called the entire church to share their dreams and their longings.
Oh,
I know that your longings for the organization are, as you mentioned, civil things, legal things, to ensure that structures within governance and so on are done. I also know that at some point in history you walked away from the church, or the church turned its back on you. And so I don't know if this is even an appropriate question to ask, but is there something you wish for or hope for or long for the church?
well, I think we've been saying this for 30 years, my friends and I. We hope that one day the church implodes so it can build itself back up
Yeah, Jesus kind of said
again.
uh,
Sorry.
about the temple in Jerusalem. He said, "I will destroy it in 3 days. It will rise again." And the disciples had no idea what he was referring to, but he was talking about his life. We could also see that as the systemic structure that disabled people from connecting with God. Jesus didn't like this transaction that people had to do, where you bought a sacrifice, you bought a sacrifice and offered that sacrifice, and that sacrifice enabled you to have a connection with God. Jesus said, "No, everyone can have a connection with God. You don't need to have this sacrifice." And so in his life took that all upon himself, and at least this is the Christian story, made that all go away in order for us to have uh, justice and peace with God. But this justice and peace is still something that we're all longing towards and hoping towards, but every day we're called as Catholics to build. And so we're so grateful that to hear your story, to hear your cries and pains, but also your work and justice and your passion to make things right, to make things so that things like this doesn't happen again in the future.
Yeah.
So,
And I
uh,
think everyone who's Catholic knows that when you're Catholic, it impacts every single part of your life, right? So school, church, whatever groups I belong to, like it was the foundation of our lives. And then when I went to the church and explained to them what happened and I didn't feel supported, it was like the rug was pulled out from under me and I was just flailing because I didn't know where are my people? Where's my community? And so I think that's important for parishioners to know that the way that the church treats victims means that the parishioners need to support the victims to say, that's not who the church is. That's not what the church is. That's what those men are, or those people in those positions. Again, it's all about clericalism to me in that point, right? And so, wouldn't it have been lovely for me if all the parishioners had surrounded me with love and said, what you need, we're here to support you. Can I go get your groceries for you because you haven't been out of the house for a week because my depression was so bad? Or can I offer you a weekend of childcare so that you can take care of yourself for the weekend instead of being a mom during after after school and on the weekends and trying to be and being a victim during the week during weekdays. So that was really hard. But if I'm going to be rejected, or if victims are rejected by the chair of the sexual abuse committee and the bishop, there's lots and lots of parishioners. Surely one or two can support the victim to say, you did nothing wrong, was it not your fault? Because a lot of us at the beginning think that. So if the Christian community could surround survivors with love, that would just be so helpful.
Thank you for that reminder. And I think that's a call to action for Catholics to be true disciples of Jesus, who did that kind of outreach to the marginalized, the oppressed, the victimized. So it's just making us better Christians in this call. But hearing your pain there is real, and that feeling of being ostracized. You talk about how your faith had been a sense of betrayal and the abuse not only on your body but the abuse on your faith and the relationships. All of that had a tremendous toll. Is there one last thing you'd like to say to our viewers? Anything that you think you want them to walk away with from having listened to your story today? Maybe something for them to bring to their prayer life, something to share with their own church groups, something. What one thing would you like to share before we part?
I would probably want them to know that there are more victims out there than they realize. I would say I probably speak on behalf of 10,000 victims. So for every victim that has found their voice and is able to speak about it, there's 9,999 others that are not able to do that for their own reasons. And I have nothing negative to say about that. They're where they are, and they need to protect themselves. They're doing what they need to do. They're doing their best. But there are lots of us out here. I know so many, and I have, even after 30 years, I still have at least one new person contact me every week. And I help them find the balance in their life and make referrals so that they can hopefully continue to heal. But for them to hear from another survivor that I get it, I know exactly what you're going through, and this is what my journey is, right? Has been like, and where are you in your journey, and how can I support you? It's just people being people. People, that's the way that I grew up, right? Be kind to your neighbors, love yourself, and just, try to accept that they're the ones that are victimized and they're the ones that need support. And it really doesn't take a lot to support another person in their time of need.
I appreciate that. Be people. Be
Yeah.
loving people that are attentive, aware, supportive, caring, courageous, standing with, advocating for. I thank you. Thank you so much for that reminder, and thank you so much for your vulnerability and courage, sharing your story on behalf of our viewers and everyone at Concerned Lake Catholics. We thank you so much for your time and for your story.
Thanks, Mark. Pleasure to meet you.